We're live. So howdy, Facebook Live. Sean Yesner here with Jim Jenkins from Jenkins Law. Say hi, Jim.
Hey, everyone.
So like I promised yesterday, we're going to do a behind-the-scenes recording of a Crushing Debt podcast episode with Mr. Jenkins. And so we will be able to take your questions live. Let us record the episode first, and then if you have questions, I'll come back and we'll interact with you on Facebook Live after we're done with the recording of the podcast. So if you're ready.
I think I'm ready.
Okay. On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast, Jim Jenkins with Jenkins Law. So welcome back to this week's episode of the podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, and the podcast is brought to you by Yesner Law, but we have a guest in studio, in office, whatever we want to call this. I met this guy, I met this attorney, about 4 or 5 years ago. He was a young associate attorney at another law firm trying to do some personal injury law, walked into Ruth Eckerd Hall into one of my networking groups, and I think the networking group was never the same again. He is a graduate of Furman undergrad, and he is a graduate of Stetson Law. And when he came out of law school, he started working for the Pinellas County Assistant State Attorney's Office, prosecuting crimes in Pinellas County. He then went on to this other law firm. Whoa. You know what I'm going to do?
What's that, Sean?
We're going to stop the recording. We're going to start over because Facebook is interfering with all the bings and bops and beeps. So I'm going to shut down Facebook Live, or shut down Facebook notifications. Plus, I didn't like that intro anyway. So, who just binged on me? Let's see.
It was almost 6 years ago, Sean.
It was 6 years ago?
It's 2012, April.
Okay.
August 2012.
Yeah, but Facebook just dinged in my ear, so I'm going to turn, I think. Yeah. So Facebook Live, let me know if you can hear me out there. I think you can. I know you can hear me. Okay, cool. So let's start over. Hey, Facebook Live, we're starting over the podcast. I can only see Jim's eyes there, he said. Okay, you ready? Get back to work, Terry. Especially if you're leaving early.
Hi, Terry.
On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast, Jim Jenkins of Jenkins Law. So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, and as always, the podcast is brought to you by Yesner Law. But this week I have in office, in studio, a guest. And so I met this person 6 years ago when he walked into a networking meeting that I attend, and we can't get him to quite leave the networking group, but we're working on it. So he graduated from Furman undergrad. He graduated from Stetson Law School. He then started working as a Pinellas County Assistant State Attorney prosecuting crimes here in Pinellas County, which is Clearwater, St. Petersburg, for those of you outside the area. He then went to another law firm, but after about a year or two there, founded his own law firm in 2013. He was able to successfully grow the law firm so that now his wife, who is also an attorney, works with him at the law firm, I think runs the law firm. And he's also now hired 2 associate attorneys who also work at the law firm, as well as a bunch of staff who help out. The firm practices primarily criminal law, personal injury law, but what we're going to talk about today on the podcast is insurance claims, first-party insurance claims. So I want to welcome to the podcast, finally, my friend Jim Jenkins. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Sean. I've been hearing so much about this podcast that I felt as my mentor, and based upon everyone else hearing about the show, that I had to come check it out for myself. So I really appreciate you being here and busting my chops a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do it every single time. So you do some criminal law.
That's correct.
And here in the Tampa Bay area, so Pinellas, Hillsborough.
In Pasco County primarily.
And then the law firm expanded to take on personal injury cases. And I know your wife, Kellyanne, is as are you, very avid runners and athletes, and got me into running. And I know that she has a passion for helping out the bicycle community with any of their injury actions. So people out there riding around on bicycles, get hit by cars, get into accidents, whatever. Kellyanne enjoys taking care of those people, right?
That's correct.
But then the firm expanded again into insurance claim litigation and first-party litigation. So for the listeners, what is first-party litigation?
First-party litigation involves disputes between people and their own insurance company, and there's a lot of different variables of that. For example, it may be a chiropractor who has a claim against a person's insurance company supposed to be paying their own medical bills. It may be someone who has to fight their own insurance company, like a business owner, asking for there to be coverage afforded if that business owner gets sued. But one of the particular areas that we've encountered a lot of, Sean, is homeowners who have homeowners insurance that encounter issues with their own insurance company after a major storm, such as Hurricane Irma. So there's actually been a lot of rise in people asking questions about what options there are, which is a saying I got from Yesner Law about knowing what your options are, but what the options would be for a homeowner who receives a denial or an underpayment on a claim when they have tons of damage to their house as a result of a Category 5 hurricane.
And I think that's what I was going to ask about, is so that these are all claims where there's been damage to the house and the homeowner has gone to the insurance company and said, hey, I've got this policy. I had this damage to my house. Please come out and fix it. And then the insurance company says no, or they say we're going to fix it, but it's 10 grand in damage and we're only giving you 2 grand. Or
That's correct. Usually what happens is people are required to have homeowners insurance if they have a mortgage on a property in the state of Florida. And homeowners insurance is essentially a contract, which is a two-way street. The homeowner pays for coverage in the event that there is what's called a covered peril, meaning something that the policy provides coverage for. And in exchange, if that covered peril occurs, the insurance company is supposed to provide either repair, replacement, or any kind of financial means to offset the covered peril causing damage to the home. However, the main issue that people run into when they buy these insurance policies is that they don't read the 73 or 80 pages or 1,000 pages, whatever it may be, that states that, well, certain things are covered and then certain things are excluded. Kind of like with health insurance policies where you may be able to go to the doctor, but certain pre-existing conditions are excluded. So it's an area of law where a lot of people, when they sustain damage to their house, call their insurance company, but then later learn that maybe this particular damage isn't covered due to one of these enumerated exclusions in the policy.
So, which is why it's important. We've had Rich Fika on the podcast before. He's with Florida Coastal Insurance, and so that's why it's important to have somebody, whether it's Rich, whether it's your insurance agent, whether it's you, whether it's me. It's important to have somebody look over the insurance contract, the premium, the quote, the policy itself, to see what's covered and what's not covered, because you could get yourself into hot water.
Exactly. And one of the things that we encounter, and I've encountered on a lot of cases, is that there's always a factual dispute as to whether or not something should be covered by the insurance company and not. A perfect example would be that wind damage is generally covered by a lot of policies, but wear and tear is not. So if you have an older roof that was subject to wear and tear, but then also subject to hurricane damage, is it covered or not? And that is a question that we encounter a lot of times in litigation, or we have ourselves finding different positions where the insurance company will say, well, it's not covered, and we state that it is. So it's a very case-by-case analysis that is dependent upon which insurance company, and then even within those insurance companies, which adjusters actually looked at the claim.
Well, and that was the other thing that I wanted to ask you about. So the insurance company has its adjusters, and they come out and they say there's been no damage to the house. And that's where you go out and you would get somebody like an Andrew Gordon, who's also been on the podcast before, who's a public adjuster who represents the homeowner, who then comes out and says, no, there's X amount of dollars in damages. And then you and Andrew fight against the insurance company's attorney and the insurance company's adjuster, and you try to come to some middle ground to get the house fixed, right?
That's correct. In addition to public adjusters, which are just one resource for homeowners, there are other careers such as general contractors, structural engineers, and other professionals that would be able to state what the cause of damage is, because ultimately the question is whether or not there was damage that caused the house to suffer some kind of loss. If that damage is covered under the policy, but then after that, the biggest argument usually is assuming that there was hurricane damage, which is kind of hard to state. There was not a Category 5 hurricane that came through most of Florida. The issue is, to what extent is that damage covered? Are we talking about the $500 repair, or are we talking about a $50,000 whole replacement of parts of the house? And ultimately, it's that what they call scope of coverage that is usually litigated in the courts.
And it's really a breach of contract claim. So you're going into court claiming, hey, insurance company, my client had a contract with you to provide insurance, and when you refuse to provide insurance coverage, you breached the contract.
Correct. Part of the analogy also is that if a homeowner fails to make their premium payment, they can't come back later and state to the insurance company, well, I know I didn't pay you for the last 3 months, but you still need to provide coverage for this. So again, it goes back to what I alluded to earlier, the two-way street of a homeowner securing coverage in the event that the worst thing, such as a hurricane, happens to destroy your home. And in exchange for that money, what they would call consideration under contract law, that the insurance company states, if that bad thing happens, we will come to your aid. And most importantly, we won't only pay for part of the damage that's covered, but all the damage that's covered under this 80-page document, which we call a homeowner's policy.
Right. And then that's less the deductible. So if you have a $5,000 deductible, we'll send you X, but less your $5,000. We'll send you whatever, 50 grand, 80 grand, 10 grand, whatever, minus your $5,000 deductible? Or is this something where the homeowner's got to come out of pocket 5 grand and then they'll get a big check from the insurance company later?
If there is a deductible, because that's a term of the contract, that does have to be paid. But what's interesting when you're talking about the amount of damages on an insurance claim is that determining how much damage is attributable under a covered peril is the biggest fight. So, for example, I have a claim where there was someone who suffered a water loss that happened during Hurricane Irma but was not related to Hurricane Irma. The hurricane deductible is $8,000. The normal deductible is $1,000. So one of the disputes we're going to have is which deductible applies. And then not only that, but in addition to the actual contract stating what's covered and what's not covered, there's also this small thing called Florida law and the Florida Building Code, which state that, well, if we have to make a repair to the house, and we're going to use a roof, for example, we're going to repair this older roof, and I can't match where the repair is going to be to the rest of the roof, then there's a Florida statute that says you have to replace the whole thing so that you and other real estate professionals are not trying to sell a house which looks like a leopard or a zebra because of different patterns.
Like a patch together.
Exactly. So there's a Florida statute out there, which interestingly enough, we call it the matching statute, that says it has to match and with like material, like color, but there's no case law that really interprets that. So what does that mean? And that's an area of law that, with this new rise in a lot of these storm claims, is yet to see what will be litigated in the courts.
So that's first party litigation, and it's litigation by the homeowner against their insurance company. So dear my insurance company, you breached the contract, you broke the contract, I'm going to sue you for that. One question that may come up, and I'm not going to necessarily ask you to quote prices, but one issue that may come up is the homeowner may say, well, that's all great, but if it's a breach of contract case, how do you all get paid?
That's a very good question, and it comes up every single case. And interestingly enough, there's a Florida statute that says that if you have to bring a claim against your own insurance company and you prevail on that claim by $1 or more, that the insurance company has to pay your attorney's fees and costs. So, unlike a personal injury case where there is a contingency fee agreement where the lawyer generally would take a third or 40%, depending if that personal injury case is in litigation. And unlike a criminal case where it's generally a flat retainer up front, this kind of fee is paid separately by the insurance company, because one of the homeowner's rights under Florida law is that they shouldn't have to pay out of pocket to enforce a contract against their own insurance company.
Okay.
Now, but interestingly enough, there's a lot of rules and laws being handled in Tallahassee as we speak, addressing that certain statute, and there's arguments on both sides to see how long that will stay. So for anyone out there who likes to Facebook Live, the Supreme Court of Florida, which I think now has a Facebook page, that's one of the issues you may be here litigated, as far as under what circumstances is a homeowner still able to avail themselves of that statutory right.
That's awesome that they have their own Facebook page. So that's first party litigation. I do want to touch a little bit on third party litigation. So first party litigation is, it's my policy. I'm suing my insurance company because they didn't cover some of my damage. Then a third party litigation is, I'm suing your insurance company because your insurance company should have covered my damage. Is that right?
That is correct. And it's interesting the way that lawyers speak about this versus when I'm meeting with someone out at the running club or out at a restaurant. Practically what this means is, third party is when you have to sue another person. So Sean rear ends me outside of the Tampa Bay Brewing Company. I make a claim against Sean for my injuries. However, Sean has insurance. He submits that claim and says, hey, insurance, you need to defend me. So technically my lawsuit would be against Sean Yesner, but in reality, his insurance company is providing the defense. There's actually a law or a rule of evidence that states that in cases like that, and you go to court, the other side or the jury is not allowed to hear to what extent Sean Yesner has insurance in that situation. The idea being that we don't want to have people just sit there and say, oh, well, there's insurance, so Sean Yesner's not paying for the damages caused to Jim Jenkins because he was driving recklessly through a parking lot. But the difference between that and first party insurance is inherently the lawsuit is Sean Yesner versus insurance company.
Right. Okay. And of course, if, and I would never ever do this, but if I had a couple of beers at Tampa Bay Brewing and then hit you after having a couple of beers, well, I guess I couldn't call you for the DUI because I would have hit you. But if it was somebody else, I could call you to help handle the DUI charge, right?
You could call me to help handle that. I would suggest that you make a decision beforehand if you're going to have a couple beers not to put yourself in that situation. But
true,
I have handled, and my partner Donnie Scruggs, who works with me, who we used to try cases against each other, and now we work together. So we've seen it from both sides of the table that if you do find yourselves getting a ride to have a free stay on the dime of the Hillsborough County or Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, that is a situation we could consult with you as well. Okay.
So I want to turn back to first party litigation for a little bit, because I want to talk about, so let's say something happens, the house catches on fire from a lightning strike, or a hurricane comes through, or a hailstorm, or something like that. And now I see that my house has damage. What's the first thing that I do? Who do I call first? Do I call you? Do I call the insurance company? Do I call my agent? Do I call the public adjuster? What's my first step?
The first step should always be, whether it's your own property that gets damaged or if someone else damages your property. So for both third party and first party, is to contact your own insurance company. One of the provisions of every insurance contract that I've encountered is that you have to cooperate with your insurance company. So if you call your insurance company and state, well, 5 years ago, there was an accident, your insurance company is going to say, well, you really should have told us early on about that. So you always submit the claim, because not only is that part of the insurance contract, but it helps document timeliness to be able to correlate the covered peril with the date of loss. So that way you don't have someone coming and saying, well, it's a late reported storm. Do we even know if a storm happened on that date? So you're able to document that, but also you're able to determine whether or not the insurance company is going to act in good faith and properly adjust the claim, which a lot of them do. A lot of them really come out and they make the payment, and then there's no further issue. But then if they don't, it allows you to build your case so that way you can have an engineer or Andrew Gordon or a attorney come and look at it after the fact. because one of the small little laws that applies to these claims is that the insurance company has 90 days from when you report the claim to make a claim determination. So you have to give your company the right opportunity to be able to address the claim. What I've been encountering, though, is with Hurricane Irma coming through in the middle of September or early September of 2017, it's clearly been 90 days, and there's still a lot of homeowners who state, I haven't heard anything back. So under that circumstance, the law does provide remedies for those homeowners.
Because they haven't heard back from their insurance company yet, and it's been more than 90 days since they reported the claim.
Correct.
Okay. And I know that part of the insurance contract, at least in all the insurance contracts that I've seen, part of the insurance contract is you have to tell your insurance company because they need to handle the claim. You can't just sit on it and say, oh, hey, by the way, insurance company, I had this loss. You have to give them the opportunity to try to do something about it first.
That's correct, because that is the coverage that you paid for. So essentially you have to let the insurance company do their job, or give them the opportunity to do their job. And also part of your contract with them is that you are going to cooperate and you're going to let them have that opportunity. That way you're not in a position where you're both butting heads from the get-go.
Right. Okay. So the easiest way to get a hold of you is to go to the website. I know there's a ton of information. There's bios of you and Kellyanne and Donnie, and the new attorney is...
Her name is Ashley Ward Singleton, and she started with us in early January of 2018.
Okay, so there's information on all of you, and the website is Jenkins Law PL. So Jenkins Law, P is in Paul, L is in Larry, PL.com, sort of like Yesner Law PL, which a little sidebar on corporate law stands for Professional Limited Liability Company. So Jenkins Law is an LLC for all intents and purposes. But the website is jenkinslawpl.com. And then the best way to get a hold of you is actually to go through your paralegal, Kate. And so it's Kate, Kate, at jenkinslawpl.com. And so how long has Kate been with the team?
Kate has been with us, I knew you were going to ask me one or two trick questions, about a year and a half. But interestingly enough, Kate, Kellyanne, and Ashley all used to work at the same firm doing insurance defense, just like I used to work at the state attorney's office doing criminal prosecution. And we have essentially, even though we've only worked together for 2 years, we've known each other since we all graduated from Stetson Law. So it's interesting that even though Ashley has been with us since January 2018, we've known Ashley since she first graduated law school many years ago. I've known Donnie since we were in law school together, and I known Kellyanne before going to law school because I would never be crazy and marry another attorney, but I would marry my college girlfriend who just happened to go to law school and in the competitive triathlon spirit got through law school with higher grades and a higher paying job straight out of graduation.
Well, and I won't ask you who's faster.
That depends on the race, Sean. You know that.
So, and the reason we have people contacting Kate instead of you is because Kate can really organize the file, organize the claim, get started on the intake, get started with some basic information until you can get out there, and Kate will get you in touch with the person to really analyze the claim, give the legal theories, do the attorney work behind the claim, but then it goes to Kate to handle with your supervision. And so since she's the one that's going to be the primary face behind how the claim is working, with you as the attorney in the background going to the hearings and filing the motions and doing all that kind of stuff, just makes it easier to go to Kate to get the process started, right?
That's true. And the way I approach, and I think a lot of people approach their law practices, just like a football team, it takes more than one position in order to score a touchdown. And the way that this works, and the beauty of having us all work together in different capacities before at different law firms before coming together, is that Kate is so well versed in these claims and the details. And because every claim is similar in the fact that it is a claim against your own insurance company, but different because of the cause of the damage, the location of the residence, because we have claims all over the state of Florida from Key West all the way to Tallahassee, that it's important to get a lot of the vital information from the beginning. That way I can determine whether or not we need an engineer, whether we need a public adjuster, see what kind of coverage determinations there are. So that way when we file the lawsuit, we know exactly what we're looking for and we're able to work together, as opposed to not having the full story or all the information necessary in order to make sure that we're able to prevail in court.
Oh, cool. Well, before we put an official bow on this week's episode, is there anything else you wanted to mention? Is there anything else that I missed? Is there anything you think the listeners should know before we wrap it up?
For the first time in my life, I'm going to say no, Sean.
Wow. Awesome. I managed to get Jim to stop talking.
It's only happened once or twice. But I see what you just did. I asked you again, no trick questions before we did this.
So that, I think, will wrap it up for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Please connect with us on social media. If you enjoy the content, please review and rate and share the Crushing Debt Podcast with all of your friends. Jim, thank you again for being this week's guest on the Crushing Debt Podcast.
Thanks, Sean, for letting me copy your business model with the PL, which I saw you took credit for, but for being a good mentor, good referral source, and a good friend.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And we will talk to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. And we're done recording the podcast episode. Thank you, Jim. But we're still on Facebook Live. So,
oh, geez.
I know.
Uh-oh.
But hey, David Longacre was watching.
Hey, David.
I don't know if he's still on or not.
Well, he would know. He would know who was faster between Kellyanne and I because he's faster than both of us.
Okay. And I don't know if he's still. Let me see if I can tell. I can't tell, but I did see Lauren Pincus just jumped into so he may be watching us too.
Hi, Lauren, if you're out there.
Hey, Lauren, if you are out there, we're going to Tampa Bay Brewing for lunch.
That whole having beers at Tampa Bay Brewing was a hypothetical that Sean wants to now create into a reality.
I know. So I'll let Facebook Live run for a little bit longer just to see if we get any questions. If we don't get any questions, I will shut Facebook Live down with my thanks for tuning in, for watching us goof off for a few minutes and create content on the podcast here. Going once.
I wouldn't say necessarily goof off. I was giving you some real answers to some real issues.
You were giving. I don't do this stuff. I don't know. So you were giving some good answers.
Most of the time when people ask me questions involving real estate, I just give them your number.
There you go. So nothing else on Facebook Live. So I think we're gonna put a bow on Facebook Live as well. I don't know why I just came up with that statement. Put a bow on it. I'm never gonna say that again. We're gonna stop Facebook Live now. But thank you all for watching. I'll let you know when I have another guest in studio. Please stay tuned to Facebook Live for other updates about Yesner Law, about the Crushing Debt Podcast, about guests that I have, Jenkins Law, about all that other kind of stuff. And we will talk to you next time. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.